Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter here for another episode of So Chatty, episode number 150 for August the 2nd, 2024. And we're going to continue our series today on sergers and cover stitch machines. And Walter's laughing his little face off, which I have no idea why.
Well, no, that you're showing our mistakes and threading our.
Yeah, we're coming to that, okay? There is a little bit of a, how do you put it gently, shit show coming up. But before we get to that, let's take a look at what I've been working on. Walter has nothing to show you. Okay, I had 7 quilts sitting by Lucy for quilting. This was one of them. This is the Spirit of Christmas. Yeah, the Spirit of Christmas Hope is what it's called. It was a panel. I showed you the panel and the fabrics. It came in a kit that I got from the Quilters Cupboards about a month ago or so. And I got it all together. And now it is all quilted. It is all bound, everything. And I think it turned out pretty good. I am not a big fan of doing things with panels, but I really like this panel. It's not a huge quilt. It's only, I'm looking at it on the back. It's only maybe 40 by 40. Something like that. It's basically a wall hanging thing, but it's done. It is quilted and it is bound, so that's off my plate. And this is another one. Now, this one I did quite a while ago. It is a pattern by Stephanie of Stephanie Stitches. I call it, she did a block. She showed us how to make the block. I like the block so much, I made it into a quilt. Other people I've heard have made them into table runners or into pillows and things like that. Thing was, though, these are very large blocks, and I really didn't realize how large they were until I got all 20 of them, 16 of them together with the sashing that I put on the border. This is a big quilt. This is about 96 inches square. So it is a big quilt.
Queen size.
Yes, and it just made it on Lucy. But it's all quilted now as well. Lucy was a fairly cooperative girl on both of those quilts, so that one's out of my way. I did do a third one, but I can't show that to you because it is the quilt that I designed the pattern for, and I'll be teaching at Stephanie's spring retreat in Berlin.
It's a secret.
It's a secret, so you will not see that one until sometime late next April, and the pattern at that time will be available as well, free. I don't charge for my patterns, but I got that done. Now, I just this morning got another quilt done, which I will show probably next week because I got it quilted, but I haven't got it bound yet. But tomorrow at the Pop-Up Sew Day, that's one of the projects I'll be working on to get that out of my way. It's a pretty large quilt too. It is the one, if you remember, as I did show the top, it's the one I made the 4 giant maple leaves. And I think I'm going to call it X marks the spot because I didn't think about it at the time, but I thought I was being very clever by taking each block, turning it 45 degrees all the way around, so the stems all went into the center of the quilt. Well, the stems make a big X, is what it looks like. And the first thing you see when you look at the quilt is not 4 maple leaves, you see an X. So, and I had a little trouble when I was quilting that as well, but I'm going to talk about that in more detail on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday on the Idiot Quilter. And I've got one on Lucy right now that I'm doing for the first time. I'm doing custom quilting on it. It's the Underground Railroad quilt that Stephanie had us so long, and I think she's still working on some of the blocks. I'm not sure if she got them all done or not yet for that. And I did show that top some time ago when I got it done. Well, I've got it on there now, and I am basically trying to teach myself how to do custom quilting. And that's going to take a while because, basically I am quilting something a little different in each block. And there are 15 blocks, plus sashing, plus borders. And I've been running into some problems with Lucy, but I think I have them figured out. It wasn't so much that Lucy was being a bad girl, it was more or less me. It's me. Of course, Lucy never takes credit for her mistakes. She always blames me. She's kind of like you. Yeah, always blame me. Anyways, that's what I've been up to. Walter's still working on a shirt. Yeah, enough said about that. Okay. This coming Wednesday, as always, sewing with Stephanie and Steven. We start at 9. We go to about 4. all are welcome. It's a Zoom thing. It is not. It is a private Zoom. It is not a YouTube live or anything like that. Um, connection is in the show notes below, the link. Pop-up Sew Day! Yes, Pop-up Sew Day, first one of August, which might make you believe there could be a second one in August, and there probably could be. But right now, this Saturday, August the 3rd, starting at 8 a.m., it's when I open up the doors. All are welcome. Work on whatever you want to work on. And we'll run until about 4:30. I used to go till 5, but it's kind of conflicting with Stephanie because she's on at 5 with her, what she's doing, her live. So I didn't want to, a lot of the people coming to the Pop-Up Sew Day want to see Stephanie's too, and they go to it, including myself. So yeah, we'll stop at 4:30. So bring whatever you want to work on, and it's lots of fun. We always have lots of fun. Okay, now picking up on an issue that is, my pet peeve, as you well know, because my belief is that one cannot quilt a quilt on an embroidery machine. So I came across this video the other day by ZZ Top. I know he really, his hair goes down to his waist. I mean, come on. Nothing makes you look old like a beard like that and long hair. But anyways, shouldn't be criticizing him for his fashion sense. I'm sure he's a wonderful human being. Anyways, it's Brad Martin is his name, and he shows you how to do edge-to-edge quilting on the Bernina 990, which is their new super deluxe embroidery machine. This machine, I looked it up, retails, well, the manufacturer suggested retail pricing, Canadian dollars, is $24,999, $25,000 for this machine. I mean, at that price, it should basically do all the patchwork, put the quilt together, quilt it, and whatever. But it doesn't. But I was really intrigued to see how this would work. And for the first little bit, and I have put the link to this video. It's a long video. It's almost 2 hours long. I put the link for it in the show notes if you're interested. However, I was very disappointed. I thought they have finally done it. They have created an embroidery machine that can quilt a quilt. No, they haven't. It comes close. It has all kinds of buzzers and bells for lining things up. He shows you all of those. He got lost in the process. It's a very involved process. End result, not sure it's worth it. Also, once again, he did not demonstrate on a full-size quilt. He demonstrated on a sandwich, a quilt sandwich, but he had a piece of solid fabric on the top as his top, solid piece of fabric on the bottom as his backing, and the batting in between. Which is fine, except for the fact that everybody knows when you quilt a quilt, you have a lot of seams you go over repeatedly. He wasn't going over any kinds of seams. He had flat fabric. I have yet to see a great video out there showing someone quilting a large quilt, not a baby quilt, a large quilt, at least a full size or queen, on an embroidery machine. So he also showed you how long it would take you to do it. He fast forwards through a lot of it, and he makes no bones about it, that it's going to take you a while to do this. And he got, as I said, he got lost in the process because there was a laser light involved and there's a camera built into this machine. Now, those two things I thought, oh yes, they're going to make lining your things up really easy. Not so easy. And this is from somebody who sells these machines. He owns the store, I guess. That he was, whatever the store is, I don't know what it is. But anyways, I stick to my guns. That manufacturers are telling you, Janome and Bernina anyways, that their super deluxe, most expensive machine they have on the market that embroiders can do a quilt. But here's the funny part. I have yet to find a video by either of those two companies that shows a quilt full size, being quilted on one of their embroidery machines. You know, at $25,000, you can buy a long arm. Now, you can't buy the computerized program for that money, include it with it. That's an additional amount of money. But you could buy a long arm. But Walter said, what, the people who don't have the room, this might appeal to them. They're thinking.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose it might appeal to people that only do baby quilts or something.
Yeah, if you were just doing table runners, baby quilts, pot holders, or if you were doing quilt as you go kind of techniques, yes, this might be something, you know, you would like, especially if you don't want to take time to do free motion quilting, or you just don't like free motion quilting. Yes. But
it doesn't matter what kind of embroidery machine
no.
you have, even if it's one that where it was easier to have do a quilt on. Like I saw one, it wasn't demonstrated, but it gave you the idea that you might be able to quilt on, was an industrial 10 needle machine.
Yeah.
Because the fabric, your quilt could hang off of the end on either side, right? And you can move it over. But even in that case, you would still have to do multiple hoopings.
Yeah, and
to get it across and try and figure out to get your pattern lined up with the other side, plus keeping it straight, keeping it from going wonky or
and making sure it doesn't pop out of your hoop.
Right.
See, he had just basically the equivalent of 3 layers of fabric. But when you've started having to hoop on top of seams in a real quilt for it, that's going to put extra tension on your hoop, and it could pop. He also mentioned that this Bernina had 2 different needles it came with, or not needles, but feet it came with. And they both looked more like free motion quilting feet to a certain extent, especially one that he called the Echo. And many of you would be familiar with the foot for a sewing machine that looks like the little plastic cup around it, the rings, and that's the Echo foot. That kind of thing. He said, though, you had to make sure that you told the machine which foot you were using, because if you had the wrong foot when you started to go with it, it might actually run into your hoop and break it. So there you go. I think these companies are doing a disservice. I really do, to people. They're making people think that they can easily, oh, well, I don't have room for a long arm, but I'd have room for that machine. And it's an embroidery machine as well, so I could do other things on it. And you see the justification or the rationalization that you can give to buy one of those machines, and that's what these companies are playing on. I don't know. I would dearly love to see a video from one of those companies showing you how to do a quilt from beginning to end, a real quilt. So anyways, I stick to my guns. And my guns are this. I wouldn't waste my money on one of these machines. If you want an embroidery machine, you can get them for a lot less expense. Sure, they don't have all the buzzers and bells this one has, but basically the buzzers and bells on them, you don't use a lot of buzzers and bells for this kind of thing. And I can do just about anything on my embroidery machine that machine can do. I could even attempt to embroider or to do a quilt on a 550E.
Now,
I'm not going to.
If you're doing a quilt, if you're trying to do a quilt, you might do individual blocks on it.
Well, that's like quilt as you go. Yeah. Well, okay, but as you're saying, if you had like a queen size quilt and you want to do like what I'm doing right now on Lucy, I'm doing customized. I'm doing a different pattern in each block. You could do that. You wouldn't have to worry about the alignment so much, but you still got to worry about the bulk.
Yeah.
And if it's hard to explain, but especially if you don't have an embroidery machine, but the hoop system is what holds everything in. And if the thicker the stuff is that you're putting in the hoop, the more chance of your hoop popping if something gets snagged. If you've got a heavy quilt, you know how heavy quilts are. If you've ever tried to push a quilt through a domestic machine to quilt it, you know how heavy they get. that weight hanging over the edges of your machine, you need to support it because that pressure will drag on your hoop. And if your hoop drags, you could pop your hoop or worse
Yeah,
with it.
and I think you can't get beyond that on any kind of machine that you're
No.
trying to uh, use an embroidery feature on. Is that the fact that, see, one of the nice things about long arm is the long arm has your quilt all stretched over a
Mm,
big surface area, and the machine moves.
yeah. I mean, but the long arm is designed for that.
Yeah,
That's what that machine. I'm not using my long arm to embroider. Why use my embroider machine to do what my long arm does? You know, each machine has its potential, but they're appealing to people who one don't don't want to put out the money because it's expensive for a long arm, and don't have the room for a long arm.
but then you'd be better off looking at some of the lower end long arm type machines that maybe have a limited space if you don't end up doing a lot of really huge quilts. But if you need a long arm to do a really huge quilt.
Yeah, I mean, there's the mid arm machines, the ones where you can sit down on, look like a sewing machine, but they have a huge table around them. But again, those are designed for free motion quilters. They are not. They have a computerized system on them, but it's like the computerized system on a sewing machine. It's not like the computerized system on a long arm because basically those machines don't have anything moving the quilt around. You're the machine. Your needle is stationary and you're moving it underneath the needle, just like you do on a domestic machine. It's just that you have more space, and it has probably a stitch regulator on it as well for nice even stitches. Um, each machine has its purpose, and when you try to cross over purposes, like one machine that does it all, well, there's all kinds of problems with that. But anyways, if you want to see how this works or doesn't work, you can make your own assessment of it. Check out the video that I mentioned, edge to edge on a B990, and I put the link in the show notes, and you can take a look and see what you think with it. Okay, spent more time on that than we needed to. So today we're going to talk first of all about how you thread the serger and the cover stitch machine. Now, you know, I don't use my serger that much. So even though I have an air thread machine, which makes threading so much easier, it's still not absolutely foolproof. And you will see that in the
Yeah, when
video.
you see a couple of fools do it.
Yeah. But you know something? We could have practiced, we could have made we could have done a lot of editing in what you're about to see, and we could have done lots of cuts and everything to make it look like no problem. No, we showed you the reality. This is real. And you will hear us cursing and swearing at each other over it all. But I don't want this to discourage you if you're thinking about buying a serger, to have that discourage you. There are a lot of benefits to having a serger, and that's part of what we've been talking about and we'll talk about further in this series that we're doing. So don't let that get you down.
What you do need to do is, if you decide to buy a machine, is go into a dealer and look at the various types of machines and your budget.
Yeah, and your budget, yeah. Because the ones that are air threaders that we're showing you the Janome 2000D air threader. That's my machine. And Walter has the equivalent, but it's Elna. And Elna is basically the same machine, works the same way,
Well, yeah,
and it's made by Janome.
the machine I have looks exactly the same as Steve does, except the outside cover has Elna on it,
Elna,
and it's mine's all white and he has a silver part on it.
yeah. So, but
But
they're the
it's
same
exactly
machine.
the same machine.
Yeah. So, anyways, Walter's going to show you how to thread using the air thread system. We did talk about digging out the old serger and showing you how you thread that, but you want to know something? I don't think that would be worth the effort because
No,
that would have been definitely,
a lot of cursing and swearing, and it might have taken me like an hour to do it.
yeah. So, trust us.
Um, the one problem that we did address and tried to address anyway on the air threader is that the automatic threading system on the left and right needle, I don't tend to use because I find it's cumbersome,
Yeah, it sucks.
and so I just thread the needles.
And we talk about that in
Yeah.
the video, so we don't need to talk about that here. So, without further ado, Here's the circus show of how to thread your serger and your cover stitch machine. Get ready, buckle in. It's going to be a bumpy ride. Okay, so we're here with Walter in his sewing room, and you can see his two machines. This one right here is the Elna serger, which is the same as my Janome air thread, because Janome makes that. What are you looking for? He's
My cheater glasses.
He's bebopping all around the room here. Meanwhile, while he's looking for his glasses, this is his cover stitch, which we've shown you before. Okay, so what we're going to do is show you how easy it is to thread a serger. Okay, we're laughing because, and we'll explain that in a minute, even though these new machines, they have made them easier than the old machines to thread, it can still be somewhat frustrating if you've never threaded one of these machines before. And if you don't use your serger on a regular basis, you kind of have to review how to thread it, because I forget, because I don't use mine as much as Walter uses his. But on the Janomes anyways, they come with handy instructions right here. So we're going to take you through this, and I know we're going to run into a snag, but you'll see what I mean in a moment.
Part of the snag is the way I thread my machine.
Yeah. But anyways, so Walter, close up the machine so we can...
the machine is closed. You can't sew unless the machine is closed.
Yeah, there's a safety feature with that, what he just shoved up there, to keep you from getting your little fingers all sewn together or cut off, one or the other. Okay, you'll notice his machine is 4 threads, but none of them are threaded. And he has 4 different colors, so...
Yeah, all I've done is I've pulled the thread through the top here. I haven't actually threaded it. So
okay, so the way you thread it is you start from the right-hand side and thread each part separately until you get your way over here. Now, this is the lower looper, right?
Or is that the looper, upper looper, right thread, left thread.
Well, right needle, left needle.
Yeah.
On that. Okay, so this is an air thread machine. It actually sucks the lower and upper looper threads through their track. Whereas on older machines that don't have this system, you have to do the threading yourself, and it can be very hard to do because it's very tight confines inside that little box. So let's start. We're going to start by threading our lower looper. But what do you do first?
But what I have to do first is I have to open this door up, right, to expose where the lower and upper looper are, right? And this is also the threading mechanism in here for the lower and the upper looper. These are the ports where it sucks the thread through.
Okay, stop. You just said a whole lot of stuff that if people have never seen this before, have no idea what you're talking about. Let's not call them ports. Let's call them holes, shall we?
Yes, holes.
There's 2 holes here, and you see there's a little symbol there. One represents the lower looper, which is the one in green, and the one for the upper looper is in red. And these 2 little holes are where you shove your thread down in, and then there'll be some suction. We'll show you that, and it'll suck it all through in here and pop it out over here, and it's all threaded. Okay. So
the first step I have to do is I have to get the machine in a position where it will allow it to thread, right? You can't just thread it in any position. Right?
Okay, so what
it does is that it will, I have to make it so that the ports where the air thread, what the air thread uses, will actually be available for use.
They have to be lined up,
in
other words, so that, because it's like a system of tubes. And when the air is sucked through, when the air sucks on the thread, it sucks it through those tubes. So if this isn't set up properly, your thread will not go where it's supposed to go. So how do you set that up?
Okay, I turn this lever to the right, underneath, right?
Right.
And then I move the hand wheel slowly around until it connects.
And you know it connects when?
It'll snap in place. There we go. It has snapped in place. And so the tubes are now in alignment with the upper and lower looper.
Okay, now the instructions, as I said, are all printed here and all numbered. You just follow those instructions. Okay, so what do you have to do next?
I'm going to thread the lower looper first. So there's a little lever
toggle
here,
switch.
toggle switch to switch from one to the other. So I have to switch it over to the lower looper.
So basically, that little knob, that little toggle, the point of it has to point to the hole that you're going to thread in first. And we always start from the right side, so the lower looper is going to be threaded first. That blue thread is the lower looper.
So I'm just pulling it through the guide here, and I go through. There's a clip here that I have to press the thread through, and then I thread it through the tension discs here.
You just put it down into the channel.
And I put it into this channel here. Slide the thread around that. There's a little catch there.
See if I can show you. See the little
I
catch.
pull out enough thread that I know will go through the looping mechanism.
I think they recommend that you have about an inch to an inch and a half down inside. Now this can be a little tricky. Notice Walter's using tweezers to push it down into the hole. So you have to put in about an inch to 2 inches.
I think that's about all I can
So
get
it'll
in.
catch. And
Now
then
you also have to make sure your thread's fairly free so that I can pull it through. So I have it laying down here. Now what I do is I lift this lever up here, and this is a little pump that creates the airflow to suck it through. So when I pull the lever down, it'll suck the thread through.
Okay, all right. Oh, you see that? That was a good suck.
Yeah. So now it's pulled through my lower looper, and I just take the thread and
put on your glasses.
Put my glasses and pull the thread around to the back, which isn't really that easy.
No, it's still very awkward. That's why the long tweezers that Walter has are a good accessory to get your hands on.
The machine comes with the tweezers. So.
Oh, does it?
Yeah.
I didn't think mine did. Maybe it did. Okay, so what he's doing is he's pulling that thread in behind and away from all the little mechanisms down here. So he's pulling it to the back of the machine.
Right.
Okay, so that's the lower looper. The upper looper is done the same way, except now you have to...
I have to move this little switch over to indicate the upper looper.
To the other hole, okay.
Right. And again, I pull the thread through. I push it through a little guide here. Push it through the tension guide. And again, there's a little catch down at the bottom here for this thread to go through. I pull out enough. I have enough here, I think, to go through the path.
You don't want to be in a rush when you're threading your serger, because you can't really do it fast. So he's putting it down at that hole, just like we did a moment ago with the lower looper. Get enough in the hole.
It should be enough.
And
then again, I repeat the process and make sure that my thread's in a loose position. And I pull up on the lever for the pump, right, and push down.
Oop, there it goes.
Okay, see, now that's just popped out of my upper looper.
It'll throw your thread a fair distance, but now you have to get it in behind. Now you're going to say, well, why not just lift up your foot pedal like he's doing and put it that way? Well, yes and no, because you have a blade in between there, and you don't want it going in front of the blade.
Right, yeah, so yeah, that's the problem, is you have to guide it in behind the blade.
Now, an easier way to do this is you could drop your blade.
Oh yeah, you could do that.
Because the blade, there's a little knob here.
Knob here that,
and just...
well, I think that's, is that the knob? No, that's not the knob for the blade. This is...
Is that the knob for the blade? I thought it was... There we go. See, that dropped down. So he could then have just lifted up his foot and got the thread underneath. It's awkward. It is very awkward.
What is handy about this machine is that the blade I can drop the blade down by using that control. But in some of the older machines, you can't do that.
You can't do that. Also, the reason you might not want to, there are some applications where you don't want to cut your fabric, so that's when you would drop your blade. However, there's not a lot of applications that would be a thing with. Okay, so we've got the upper and the lower looper threaded. He's shutting the door. Are you shutting the door?
No, I'm not shutting the door.
No, because the next thing is the two needles. And again, we're moving from right to left, so we're going to the right-hand needle, and he's threaded it the same way as before.
Except now, I go through this spot here.
And you'll notice there's arrows on the machine that show you which direction your thread should go. And then under here, there is a couple of little hooks. There's one, and, well, I guess there's only one hook. Yeah, I meant the little eye hole.
Right.
That's there.
There's a little eye hole.
There's two of them, actually. One's
and then there's this needle guide.
There's one hole for the left and one for the right, so you put the right one in first, down that, in behind that little hook, and now you have the threader. This is the part Walter does not like.
Yeah, it comes with a left and right threader for the needle, but I find I have never been able to master it.
If you notice here, there's a little lever, and I don't know if it's coming in or not very clearly, but it says left and right. So it slides. Walter just slid it to the right position.
Right.
There's arrows that indicate that. That's so it'll be in alignment with the whole of your needle. That's just for kicks and giggles.
Okay, I don't use it. I just thread the needle normal.
I will tell you this. This part is now the most difficult part of threading it, because they did not design this to hold your thread very well. See, your thread comes down, it goes underneath that little plastic tab, and then you bring it straight across the two needles, and there's hooks, which are very difficult to see, and you just bring them across. Just bring it straight across the middle. Walter has great difficulties with this. It's really not that hard. Okay, that's all you need to do. And then you pop, there's a switch on the side. Just a second, let me show them. That switch on the side, Walter's going to push it up, and it should have made a loop, and it didn't do it. So, let me show you how to do this. Okay, so, as I said, it's come down, it's gone into, we're threading the right needle right here. The thread has come down through this hole, goes under that bar. Then you make sure this is in the right position first. So there's a left, there's a right. Push that over. It only goes just a little bit. Bring it down. Bring your thread underneath that and pull it across. They should have put a little hook, I think, on this little plastic piece. It would make life easier. Okay, it's very difficult to see because it's so tiny. And then let's see what happens. There we go. Now you'll need your tweezers. And the right needle is threaded. And you should bring your thread in behind. Now this is a little easier to bring behind on here because you don't have to worry about the blade. So I can just open up my foot, stuff this under. Tweezers are your best friend. Maybe they're not. Oh yeah. Okay, best way to do this
is I just
pass it through. Okay, there we go. See, I told you, you don't want to be in a rush. And there's so much bloody thread. Okay, so I now have 3 threads here behind my machine. Is that thread? Where's that thread coming from? It's from the looper. Okay. All right, so let's now do it again and see if we're lucky with the other. You just have to have your foot down. This is the left needle underneath the clip, down through the channel for the tension discs. Across, over, down through the hole, under the hook, pull down the threader, make sure it's in the left position, It is.
No, you just pushed it to the right position.
No, I just did that. It wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Jeez. Put that under there. And I don't see my little hooks for this. Where are the little hooks? This is all in the right position, yes. Okay, geez, you need to have magnifying glasses. There's the little hooks. There somewhere. Okay, there it is. It's a tiny little hook. You can't see it. It's right here, and this is what makes this difficult. And you got to keep.
It's not focusing.
No, because it's, yeah, it's too fine to show in there. But anyways, there is a little hook there. This has to come out. Make sure there's a little bit of slack in your thread, and then up, and there we go. We have a little loop. Two little loops. Oh, geez. There it is. Okay. The worst part about these is trying to see where everything is, especially when there's a camera in my face. Okay, there we go. Where the heck's the end of the thread? There it is. Okay. And why don't I see, why is my green thread in the same hole as the blue? It's not supposed to be.
Because you moved the thing in the wrong position.
No, it slid over. Okay. This is why people don't like to thread. See, what's happening here is I've got my two threads are supposed to go into separate holder holes. Here we go. Okay. There. All right. Now, if we've done this right. Oh, wait, there's something we have to turn here.
No, actually, you don't have to do anything.
This is supposed to have been turned for threading.
Yeah, it'll automatically.
No, it doesn't.
It'll be fine.
Oh, it did.
Yes,
I
does.
didn't know it did that.
Yes, it does.
I've never noticed that on mine. Okay. So, we should be able to get a chain out of this.
There's there.
Holy crap, what's down here? Jeez.
It's on.
It's upside down. You work in this room much? It's not working.
Because the foot's not down.
Oh, foot has to be down. Another safety feature. And you do have to run it through a little bit to get it. So there, we've got our chain. Now, I felt it tugging a little bit, so I might have something not quite right. Let's see here.
Let me get a piece of fabric.
I got a weird thing.
Something, give me a piece.
I don't know.
Here.
It's a clown act. We didn't say this was going to be easy, but guess what? This is easier than one of the older machines. Okay, believe it or not. Now, if you do it a lot, here, you go ahead and... If you use your serger a lot, you will have less problems with this. I have to put your foot up.
Probably because you have the green and blue going through the same hole.
Going through the what? They're going through the same needle?
Yes, it is.
Well, how did I do that? Okay, well, you get the idea. Oh my goodness, what a clown act. Yeah. So what do you, when you thread the needles, you don't use the needle threader, what do you usually do?
I just do.
The old-fashioned way?
I do it the old-fashioned way.
You just stick it through the hole.
Yeah.
And you want to know something? I have a feeling he's not the only one that probably does it, because to be honest, these auto threaders or semi-automatic threaders for the needles on the Janome Sergers and the Elna ones are not the best in the world. But that's not unusual on a lot of the domestic sewing machines too. You can have a lot of problems. See, Walter can thread it using a pair of tweezers. I can't do it that way because I can't keep my hands steady.
I can't do it right this second, so
I can't keep my hand that steady. Now you could use one of those threaders, you know, the ones that are the little barrel. You slide them down the side.
In some way, it's kind of a ripoff because you bought this machine and it's supposed to have an automatic threader in it.
Yeah.
And it does.
Well, it does, but that's for the upper and the lower looper.
I mean, that alone is worth it. See how fast I can thread the...
Yeah, he's faster than the automatic one. The biggest problem with it, the automatic one works, but it's seeing it. It is so hard to see.
Well, now something's bunching up in here.
Okay, his head keeps getting in the way.
Something's not right in here. It's not...
Well, why? What's going on? Okay, I'm having to dash around his bald spot. Put your foot down. Ah, that's what you told me.
Okay. There we go.
Okay, so it's sewing.
Yes.
So here's the thing. Don't let this get your goat, but what I do is, because I don't use mine that frequently, I have neutral colored thread in my serger. So I think twice before I re-thread it. I go, can I live with that neutral color on whatever I'm doing?
Well, it's an air thread. You're not supposed to... I mean, I don't have any problem threading this thing. I think I like the fact that the lower looper just sucks it in. The lower and upper looper just sucks it in. Compared to my old machine was extremely difficult to do the lower looper. And the other features that I like about this machine is that I can move the blade up and down without having to take it apart. Because my old machine, I had to take it apart to do that. And I also have the option of making it a 3-thread machine for doing a rolled, what do you call it?
A rolled hem.
Rolled hem. And again, I don't have to take it apart to do that, whereas my old one, I had to switch needle plates and things like that.
For these, all you have to do is there's just a switch that you toggle over to the position for a rolled hem, and there you go with it.
But
okay.
The fact that the lower and upper looper does it through air thread is a bonus. I tend not to use this needle because I find I just get frustrated with it. The needle threader for the left and right needle. And,
okay, this is very real. I mean, we could have sat here, practiced, and taken many takes until it looked like it, yep, first take. It's not reality. We're showing you exactly what the problems are that most people will run into. If you use it every day, 8 hours a day, you probably don't. But if you don't use it that often, or that even with Walter uses it fairly often, but yeah, it just takes practice. But it's still better than the old machines. Now, is the cover stitch machine easier to thread?
Not real. Actually, not really, because I don't have a needle threader on.
Oh, and does it have loopers?
It has a lower looper, but no upper looper.
Okay, so let's see how this works.
Okay, now the lower looper, there's no air thread on here, and I imagine that I'm not sure, we don't have a more modern serger that doesn't have air thread, but I would imagine the modern sergers are a little easier to manipulate, similar to this. Right, so I have it's all written out here that there's a thread guide and everything here, right? But so what happens here is that I have to, before I thread, I have to line these three up. They move up and down depending on the hand wheel position. So I have to make sure they're lined up, and there's 3 little holes in each one of these, and thread has to go through the 3 little holes.
Okay.
Okay. So I have this, I'm doing the lower looper first. Now to do the lower looper's here, I move it out of position. So it's in a position where I can thread it.
That's good.
Right? So in this machine, though, I have to pull the thread through these little holes here. Oh, sure. That's not wire holes. Oops. This alone is a pain in the butt to do, is these holes.
So what? There's one hole for the right spool and one hole for the left spool.
No,
the spool left of that?
No, this is the spool.
Oh, they
one
all...
spool. They have to go through for
tension.
tension.
I see. So it wraps around. Okay.
Right. So, and now I pull it through the tension disc. This is for the lower looper, and it goes down to through this clip down here. Oops, hang on.
Clip there. Okay.
It goes through this little clip down here, through the tension discs, right? At the bottom here, there's a little clip. And now I have to thread it through these 3 holes.
So it goes through all those 3
right
little holes. Okay.
And then it goes through, I go to the back of the lower looper, there's a catch here that...
If you have long tapery fingers, it probably works very well.
It goes through there.
Okay.
Then I have an eye hole that I have to put it through at the top here. And then it goes through a hole hole at the top of the looper. Like that. And that's done.
Well,
I move the thread to the back.
It was still semi-painful.
Move the thread to the back, and I can push the looper back into place.
Okay. So what? The next 2 threads then are your needles.
Right. So back to the needles, I have to do the same thing here. I have to put it through this eyelet here. Oops. Through this one. It's catching my other thread here. Okay, and then I slide it through this guide here. You see the arrows, follow the arrows. It's similar to doing a right and left needle on the serger. It goes up and over.
And you'll notice there's arrows showing you the direction.
Right, and I go across this one. And then here there's a guide here. I push it through the guide and the left side of this guide.
Now this does not have an automatic
threader.
So
I'm used to doing this one. That's why I go over and do that on the Serger as well. So and I just slide it through the needle and bring it to the back. And then I do my final needle, which is the same deal. Here, I'll cut this end off because it's kind of frayed. Should cut your ends off so that you have a nice clean end to work with. If you have it frayed a little bit or something like that, you may have a hard time threading your needle. And again, I go through these guides, and it's going through the same thread guide that the other one goes through. I don't know how they don't get tangled. But...
Oh, that was what my problem was. I was thinking I was threading a cover stitch machine when I put the two threads through the same hole. No. I have never threaded a cover stitch machine. I have never used a cover stitch machine.
Okay, so now I just threw it back through the guides, and I have to do the needle.
We're all shivering with anticipation here as Walter threads his needle. And then you pull your thread to the back of the machine.
Right. And we're done.
And we're done. And so, can you test it?
So.
All over the place. Sorry, people. I'm moving the camera all over the place. Here we go. They don't have automatic cutters.
Nope. So this is the cover stitch. I actually didn't stitch super well because I pulled it.
Well, we get the idea.
Yeah, so you get your two threads at the front and then your cover stitch.
Mess at the back.
Mess at the back.
Doesn't usually look like that, does it?
No, actually, it's this cloth that I'm using.
Yeah. Well, this was just, our whole demo here was to show how the machines, how you thread the machines. But the bottom line is, even though these newer machines are easier, they are still fiddly. And don't get frustrated. Just take your time. Your instructions are on the machines themselves, at least on the models we have. And we're just going to try again. And just follow the instructions and your manual. That's better. Machine sounded better too.
And it still had a little bit of a problem on the back, but that's also because my tension might be different.
Yeah.
But it creates your looping at the back and then your two thread stitches at the front.
Yeah. Okay. So that is basically how you thread these two machines. Okay. So now that you've had your giggle for the day, with all that, let's talk about thread for your Serger machine. So I'm going to let Walter talk about this because he has used a variety of threads in it because of garment sewing and things like that. I will say, though, I found on the internet a little explanation of Serger threads, because Serger thread is a little different from regular thread that you might piece with. It said on something I found on the internet, Serger thread needs to avoid creating bulky seams and is generally thinner or finer than its counterpart, regular sewing machine thread. The serger thread needs to be fairly smooth and consistent as it will be passing through so many pathways in a serger. And so what they're saying there is you want a lighter weight thread because you're going to have up to like 3 to 4 threads going through on your seams. So, you know, you don't want bulky seams.
Plus, the serger tends to use a lot of thread.
Yeah.
And especially for the upper and lower looper. It will add a lot of thread to your fabric on the edge. So you don't really want anything too bulky there.
So what do they want? What do they really, really want?
Well, no, actually, most stores will sell a brand of serger thread, and it's sold on a cone. And it's usually polyester, and it's give an example. You have one here.
Yeah, I have one here. You keep talking.
Yeah.
Just a second. Okay, so we've got a couple of brands of serger thread that we use. That would be
So
fun.
this is one that was bought at our local store. It comes in a cone like this. Most serger threads come in a cone, and it's a little bit. If you look at it, it tends to be a little fuzzy looking.
Yeah, they're lintier than, say, your
Yeah,
Aurifil or something like
and
that,
there's one from that we get from Monfil.
called Superb or Super B.
No, it's not called Super B.
Oh, I
It's
thought it
called
was.
sewing thread.
Oh, is it just called Swing Thread? I thought it was
Yeah.
called. Okay.
So yeah, well,
Are you having difficulty getting it off the cone?
yeah, well, your cone is unraveled. So anyway, it looks like similar. The thread itself is similar. It's polyester, super sew thread they call it,
Super So. Yeah.
right? And but it's similar. This is a bigger cone than the other cone that you can get. They're not usually that expensive. They're usually like $3-4.
$2.99, $3.99, $4.99.
Yeah, a cone.
Under $5 a cone.
Right? And the even though I think a lot of them are say that they're a 40 weight thread, but they're actually they must be wrapped differently than like Orfil or something like that because they are thinner feeling
Mm-hmm.
than that. And if it's a 40 weight and Orfil thread is a 50 weight, they actually feel thinner than a 50 weight. So but it is polyester.
And you don't need to put expensive thread in a serger.
Now you can use Orfil in it if you want, but you use 4 cones, and you know how expensive Orfil
At
is.
$18 to $20 Canadian.
And you
A cone.
use a lot of thread in it, so it would be pretty expensive to run Orfil through a serger. So it would be recommended for you to use the special serger thread that you can get.
Now, having said that, you can use specialty threads in a serger. Myself, I have never bothered, but when I took a couple of courses at my local quilt store when I first got my serging machine, they talked about
Woolly thread,
woolly nylon or
woolly nylon. I
and
the only time I've ever used that is during the serger class.
if
I've
you're
never
doing
used it myself.
if you're using threads, you can do a certain, it doesn't do decorative stitches, but in the way that the thread is laid down can be somewhat decorative depending on the project. So you can use that kind of thing. I have heard of people using metallic threads.
Hmm.
I don't know so much about that. I think actually in the class that I took, we did try to use some metallic thread, but it was a bit of a trick because the metallic threads, many of them, they break very, very easily.
Yeah, I don't know if I would try to use metallic threads in the serger unless you had a special serger type thread that was designed to be shinier.
Yeah. Um, like, I mean, you could use, like, for example, Walter says shinier thread. Well, like your embroidery threads, like Floriani or that kind
Yeah,
of
the
thing.
only thing is you might have to adjust your tension.
Yeah, you'd probably have to play around with your tension on it. Um, you know, you could do that. But the way I look at a serger, it's not really, with the exception of maybe if you were doing a hem or like a rolled hem on a napkin, you don't really need to use anything more than just serger thread with it. Um, but who knows? There's probably people out there that experiment a lot and probably do things
Yeah,
I've never thought of with it.
unfortunately, I've never experimented a lot. I use it to do seams on my shirts and sometimes on a bag or something like that.
Searchers are really a very a utility machine. It has a function. You know, it isn't meant to do decorative stitching.
Well, what else it's good for is sewing jersey and fleece stretchy material because the stitches end up are will stretch. And so anyone that has tried to sew a jersey or a fleece type product or something like that on a regular sewing machine, and the fabric stretches as you're sewing it, you will find that the serger does not do the same thing. The serger takes it and sews it and doesn't stretch it.
So really the takeaway of this section is you do not need to buy expensive threads to use in your serger. In fact, we would recommend you don't because that's going to cost you a lot and you're not going to get any benefit from it. Buy what is called serger thread. Where do you buy serger thread? Well, we get a lot of ours from Monfil, but you can buy it in your quilt store, in fabric
Yeah,
stores,
just go
sewing
in
stores,
to the store and say I need serger thread, and they will point you in the
and they
right
probably
direction.
have a whole rack, and they come in all the colors that you want. So, but as I said in that video you saw us, yeah, I
Now,
pick a neutral color because I don't have to rethread the machine.
now I wonder how much value a serger is to someone that really only does quilting.
Well, it isn't.
I don't think it is.
No.
Sergers are better if you're doing other projects, like I said, if you're sewing clothing, they're a big plus. If you're sewing maybe some sort of decorative items or doing some bags or something like that, you may want to use a serger for that. But I don't really see, um, unless there's some sort of specialty project that requires a serger, I don't really see that the average quilter would really
However,
use it.
having said that, I am exploring as a quilter what I can do with my serger, and that'll be part of this series in one of the upcoming sessions with it. So stay tuned. But really, if you don't sew clothing and what a serger costs, I mean, sergers aren't a terrible amount of money, but they're
You
still money.
you can get ones that are very cheap. They're $300-400, up to ones that are much more like 1,200 or more even, depending on what it does. So I mean, they all do pretty much the same
Yeah.
thing.
Well, we'll come back to that in a moment. But before we move away from what else you need with a serger, you need needles. And I found this on the internet about it. Just they worded it better than me. It says your overlocker, which is a serger, will come fitted with appropriate needles, and the instruction manual will tell you what to use. It will probably also be marked on the machine. Most modern overlockers, sergers, use the same universal 130/705H needles that are used in regular sewing machines. These should work well on most types of fabric. Well, there's an issue here. They're making it sound like you can just throw in an ordinary sewing machine needle, and no, you can't. You be very careful when you get your serger. The serger will be marked on it what the needle is that you need, and your manual will tell you as
Well,
well.
it is saying that you need a
Well,
705
yeah.
needle. The needles are a different length than a sewing machine needle, so I think they're a little shorter. I'm not sure, but they could be a little longer. I don't know.
I think they're a little longer, but I'm not
Okay,
sure.
but they are a different length than a sewing machine needle that goes into a sewing machine. So you could actually damage your machine
Yeah.
if you use the wrong kind of needle in there. And same with the cover stitch machine, it uses a special needle for it as well. And it's marked on my machine.
Yeah. Well, our sergers are marked too as to what
Yeah.
needles you should use in them too. So follow that because you could damage your machine. So if you're in the middle of a project and you decide you want to change your needle and you don't have the right needle, you think, well, here's one from my sewing machine, that'll work. No, don't do it. It might, but don't take the chance. You'll
It
wreck your
may
machine.
screw up your timing.
Yeah. And you can get needles are easy to get. Your quilt store, your fabric store, your sewing machine store, they'll have needles for these products and you can get them on Amazon and everything like that. So this is not something that is rare and they're not expensive. They're no more expensive than what you would pay for sewing needles for your sewing machine.
And just the other warning about if you get a serger and you're using a serger, do not use pins
Oh, yeah.
when you're putting two pieces of fabric together. Use clips instead. Yeah, and the reason is that if you use pins and you accidentally leave one in as you're sewing, and the blade runs over that piece with the pin in it, you'll ruin your cutting blade and you'll have to replace them, and they're not cheap.
No, they're not cheap. They're easy to replace, but they're not cheap. Ask me how I know. Because I did it. I forgot I had I never use pins with any projects that I put onto a serger for the reasons Walter has just told you. One time I did, I don't know why, I forgot it was in there. The blade hit it, and it wasn't a huge pin, but it was enough. It chipped a hole into my blade. And ironically, I bought another blade. I could install it myself. It's very easy to install. You just need a screwdriver. But the thing was, I had one already in stock. Here, I forgot about it because it came with the machine. It came with a replacement blade as well. So, yeah.
But yeah, and lots of people make that mistake. In
Mhm.
fact, the people that I sew with and that they've run over pins lots of times, and there's
Well, the people who do that are the same people who leave the pins in and sew over top of them. Okay? But this isn't a game of chicken with the serger. Your blade's going to hit that needle for sure, or that pin for sure. Whereas, it's kind of hit and miss. The needle in a
yeah,
sewing machine might hop over it.
yeah. That's so definitely be careful of
Yeah.
pins.
Um, okay, so that also comes to the about repairing your machine and cleaning it and oiling it. Well, there's not a lot you can do in terms of now I'm waiting for the Sewing Doc Academy, which is where I signed up and took the courses in how to clean your sewing machine, are supposedly going to very soon put up a series of videos for people that can buy them for servicing your serger. And I'll be sure to sign up for that. But it's one thing that you need to do, and you need to do this with your serger more often than you probably do it with your domestic machine. Because you're cutting fabric with it, because you're using thread that is not piecing quality, it's very fuzzy thread, you need to clean out your serger after every project. You wouldn't believe the gunk that gets in there, the fuzz, and it doesn't take much. One project will fill the machine up with this stuff because it's cutting all the time. So yeah, that's and oiling it. And actually,
I don't think mine has
I don't
a
think there is
guide
that.
for
Yeah, I was going
oiling.
to say I don't have a guide on mine. I've just thought of that. I don't think I've ever oiled my machine because there isn't anything to oil. So that's why I want to take the course because I'm sure there is something that probably does need oil. But I use mine so infrequently, I've never had it serviced. The only problem I've ever had with it was when I broke the blade and I fixed that myself. So, yeah. Did I fix that myself or did I take it in?
I think you took it in.
Yeah,
I know the air threaders, the blades are sometimes hard to remove.
but I thought I figured it out. No, I bought an extra blade when I was there. Yeah, that's how it worked. But it's still, I think I could have done it myself, but I didn't. Um, okay, so buying guide for a serger. So now you've seen what we've been telling you about sergers. We've hinted at what you can do with it. We're going to look at that in a little bit more detail next week. Um, but do you need a serger? Okay. Well, if you're a quilter and that's all you do is quilt, probably not. You can probably get away with it. If you do a lot of home decor, if you like to make napkins, if you like to put a nice binding around a wall hanging or something like that, or pillow slips or something like that, then a
Um,
serger is nice to have. Not necessary, but nice to
some
have.
people use it if they have fabric that frays a lot.
Yeah.
They will finish the edges off with
If you're
it.
somebody who pre-washes your fabric for quilting and that, and you don't want it all to fray out, they'll put it through the serger and trim off a little bit of it and put a binding, like a loose binding, on the edge of it, and that keeps your thread from fraying. My way of thinking, that's all a lot of extra work for naught.
Usually, high quality quilting cotton does not fray a lot when it's washed. I usually make shirts out of quilting cotton, and I pre-wash the fabric all the time, and I don't bother serging it or anything like that.
If you're worried about shrinkage, that's why you're pre-washing your fabric. Like Walter said, if it's high quality fabric, it's
Now,
probably not worth the effort to serge all the edges of your fabric, which you're going to cut all off.
but if you're working with linen a lot or something like that, you might want to serge the edges of linen because it tends to fray. But you don't usually use that in quilting, so
No. And also, then we go to the old argument, do you pre-wash or not pre-wash? I am of the camp, I don't pre-wash fabrics. that I'm quilting, using for quilts. But there's others out there that will jump up and down and say I'm a crazy turd and that you should be washing them, and the whole bit.
Well, I pre-wash everything for shirts because if you don't, then your colors might go funny in the wash.
Yeah. So okay, but see, that's a different type of sewing too. That's garment sewing. So it's to each his own. They are expensive or can be expensive machines. This isn't something you're going to pick up for $199, Serger. So having said that, then I found this just very quickly. I don't say that this particular website I found is the definitive choice. It's put out. They have an advertisement disclosure here. They say what their rankings are and everything like that. So, you take it with a grain of salt. But if you've never bought a serger before and you're not sure what you want, this is a good little guide, and the links for it are in the show notes below. And it just talks about according to this article, the 10 best sergers and overlock machines in Canada. Now, I don't know why they're saying sergers and overlock.
Well, I think they're doing it because of some people call it overlocks, usually in Europe. Here in North America, a lot of people call them sergers.
And on here, Janome calls this one heavy duty overlock serger.
Right.
So, two terms, they mean the same thing, okay?
Yeah.
But they show you what they consider to be their rating, and you can read that for yourself, and a bunch of machines. Now, they don't really show the prices here.
Well, I know the one that you're showing right here is like a bottom of the line Janome,
But
and
this one.
this one, and I think our local shop sells them for about $300.
Okay, so you can go. Now, you notice this one, the front of it, it's all dials and everything for the they're not showing it threaded, but your thread would go through these dials.
Mm-hmm.
It's the old tension system that some sewing machines had. And they can get very elaborate. They don't show Bernina ones here, but Bernina machines, they have a combination cover stitch serger machine that's very elaborate, has a computerized screen on the front of it. Looks very, very nice. But it's also a very, very nice price with it. Now, that's machine they are trying to tote. Here's another example of manufacturers trying to sell you a machine, making you think it does everything. They actually have a whole set of instructions or a kit for making a quilt using your serger. If you look at it carefully, this program that they have or whatever, you're not really using your serger for the whole process from beginning to end. But I'm going to touch on in the coming weeks on, can you make a quilt with a serger? There are people who do. I have my reservations about that, but we'll talk about that another week. Anyways, this is just a guide, and I put the link in the show notes, just a jumping off point for you if you.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably best if you have a dealer you like to go to, and go to the dealer and talk to them about the various types.
Yeah, and the thing about having a dealer as well that's local to you, ask them what happens if it does need to be repaired. Do they do it in-house? Just like a sewing machine. If you're going to buy a serger from Amazon or from a big box store or something like that, you're going to need a dealer. You're going to need somebody's going to have to fix that machine at some point in time. That's just that's Murphy's Law. Okay? So the big box stores and Amazon are not going to fix your machine.
Yeah, and you also because you can damage the blades and stuff like that. You have to be able to get a supplier that will carry those blades.
Yeah. So you're always best to go to a reputable dealer for any kind of machine that does anything to do with sewing. Okay, so next week we're going to talk about what we use our machines for the most. Of course, Walter for garment sewing. I use mine for like napkins, but I've used it for other things too. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to show you some examples of things as well with that. Now, right now, we had some comments from the last So Chatty that I wanted to just bring up because there's some interesting stuff here. One comment was, from Brenda. She says, I have made a log cabin quilt entirely with a serger. So there we go. I am curious about that. Over 30 years ago, and found the fabric, which was good, wore out faster. No idea why. I do use my serger when I have a piano key border instead of a stay stitch before sending it to the long armor because it's faster and it trims the edges nicely. And I think most of you, if those of you that are quilters, know what a piano key border is. It is little rectangular pieces of fabric that you sew together, so you have long strips. The thing is, though, at the edges of those, because it's a border, they can start to separate. So what some people do before they put it on a long arm or give it to a long armor to do, they will do what's called a stay stitch, which is basically they baste all the way close, like an eighth of an inch in from the edge of the border all the way around, just so the quilt stays together nicely. Well, this person says a serger works for that too, and I could see that for something like that. It would be quicker, and it would definitely hold everything together because you have multiple threads being interwoven over top of each other. And you're going to be cutting that edge off anyways after the quilt is quilted and you square it up. So it's an extra little safeguard in case you're afraid your seams are going to come undone while it's going through the long arm process. So there's another use for a quilter for a serger. I don't know if that was the only thing you're going to use it for. I don't think it's worth spending $2,000.
Yeah, you could probably do a nice stay stitch on your machine.
Yes, you could with that too. Carol says, my serger is an old Bernina and difficult to thread. It does both regular serging and cover stitching. So there's one of those combination machines I was telling you about. Years ago, I tried to buy the accessory that was supposed to be a seam allowance guide, but my dealer couldn't acquire it. I used my serger for raw edges before pre-washing and for finishing the seam allowances inside pillow covers. I could use my regular machine on zigzag for these two uses, but I feel I'm saving wear and tear on my expensive machine, and I can use the less expensive serger thread. So there's a lot right packed into that one comment about the economy of using a serger when it comes to how much it's going to cost you for threads. And
mind you, there's nothing saying you can't use this thread in your regular sewing machine.
That's true. You could use that serger thread in your regular sewing machine as well. And getting accessories for it. Yeah. Do you have a seam guide? I guess you wouldn't. Well, your cover stitch machine. Wouldn't a seam guide be handy?
Maybe.
Oh. Well, you're such a purist. So
yeah.
Really, use your, Madam Sews here.
Yeah, actually, I probably should get a seam guide.
I always thought a seam guide for the serger would be nice to have because I'm getting better at it, but when I first started doing any serging, like for napkins and that, trying to keep it straight, like there's lines on the plate of the sergers, but it's pulling your fabric through very rapidly and cutting as it's sewing. And you can start to wiggle a little bit.
Don't zip right through it. Stop a lot.
Yeah.
Stop a lot.
Yeah. But
because the other part of the problem with the serger is that, well, it's not really a problem, but when you're doing garments and you're doing a circular spot, fabric can go underneath on it and cut a hole through the fabric.
Yeah.
Ask me how I know.
Yeah, well, it's like when I'm sewing the lining in a bag on my domestic machine, and I sometimes get the other side of the bag creeps under and I don't realize it, so I no longer have a hole in the bag to put anything in. I have sealed the bag. Ask me how I know. Done that too. Okay, another person said, I have a friend who only uses her serger to finish the edges prior to sewing on her binding. She then sews the binding to the front and hand sews the binding to the back. She thinks the serged edges help her keep everything straight. I haven't tried it, but I'm curious. Okay, I was curious when I first read this and thought, well, yeah, that's not a bad idea. But I'm thinking it's a extra work. I don't think you need to. I mean, whatever works for you. Obviously, for this person that she's talking about, this works really well for them, and they're happy with it. But already, when you're doing the binding on a quilt, you're sewing it twice. You're going all the way around the quilt with the binding to attach it to the back of your quilt. Then you're pulling it over and you're going all over it again on the front to attach it to the front. This person is sewing it 3 times.
Yeah, well, maybe this person thinks that the raw edge inside the binding might fray too much.
Yeah, well, I got thinking of that too because that's one of the things that annoys me when I'm doing binding. Depending on the fabric I've used, I often get a lot of fraying happening, and then you have to tuck all those little frayed pieces in under when you go to sew it. I clip my binding all the way around before I do the final sewing of it onto the front of the quilt, mainly for that reason, too, to keep everything in there. And some of them I trim off with scissors. But that's not what I think that she's doing. She says, I have a friend who only uses her serger to finish the edges prior to sewing on her binding. Oh, wait. Oh, I was thinking it was the quilt, but no, I think I see what she's doing. Yeah, she's putting the binding. You've got your 2.5 inch or 2 1/4,
Well,
depends what you
isn't
fold it in half.
okay. I haven't really done a lot of binding, so you usually have raw edges on either
Uh-huh.
side of your binding,
Yeah,
right?
which
Well,
is what I was
some
talking about.
people think that if you don't have a fear that this stuff will fray inside when you
What, on your binding
no,
or
yeah,
on your
you know,
quilt?
if your raw edges are encased inside your raw edges will end up
Raw
being
edges of what? Of the quilt or your
of
binding?
your binding
Okay.
gets encased inside the binding, doesn't it? When
Yes.
you're sewing it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So some people have this fear that your raw edges on that are being encased are going to fray inside the quilt as it's being washed. See,
Yeah, but they can't.
yeah, I know. Well, see, but they don't know that.
But I think, no, I think what she's doing, and it makes some sense, is what I just said. I've got my fabric folded in half, so I've got this raw edge here. That raw edge is being sewn to the raw edge of the quilt on the back. Then you flip it over and sew it down the front. And those frayed edges hang out, so you have to tuck them in as you're putting it. That's why I clip mine all the
Oh,
way
okay.
in case it. But if you put a binding, like if you actually put a serged edge on that binding before you sew it
Yeah,
onto the
okay.
quilt at all, you wouldn't have to worry about that. But here's what you'd have to worry about. Because you're trimming the fabric, I think you would have to make your binding strip slightly larger by about maybe 1/4 inch instead of a 2.5 inch strip, 2 3/4 inch strip. It would give you 1/8 of an inch that you could cut off for the stitching on it.
Yeah. Anyway,
Hmm.
yeah,
Possibility, possibility. I just don't know if it's worth the effort, the
yeah. I
extra
think it's a
time.
lot of work.
But it's a possibility. Yeah. So learn something new every day. So thank you, Laura, for sending that into us. You got my brain going now. Okay, so that's it today for us. So just a reminder, pop-up sew day this Saturday, August the 3rd, starting at 8 a.m. Links in the show notes, and there's other links in the show notes you may be interested in as well. Next week, we're going to be looking at how we use our sergers for a few things. So what that looks like, I don't know. I haven't got it planned yet, but that's what we're talking about. So hope you got something out of this today. Long session, comedy routine, and threading your serger as well. No extra charge for that little bonus there. And we'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Bye for now.